Well, hello everyone. Ivana Taylor here, your host for Bizapalooza Monday edition. We are plugging in, and today we're plugging into marketing process. Now, I don't know if you're running a marketing process. Sometimes I think I'm running a process, but I'm really not running a process. If you don't have predictable results, chances are you don't have a process. So today I have a special guest for you. I'm very excited. His name is Nathan Ellering, and he is from CoSchedule. Not gonna lie, one of my favorite tools. It saves me, I don't know, like a ton of time. Seriously, tons of time. We're gonna talk all about it. We're gonna integrate marketing process because quite frankly, my confession to you is that I'm not as good at it as I would like to be. I know I'm a marketing expert, not so good on the marketing process, and I wanna learn how to use CoSchedule better. So I'm gonna talk about all things marketing process. Nathan Ellering is our guest. Welcome, Nathan.
Yeah, I'm really glad to be here. Thanks for having CoSchedule. Thanks for having me on the show. I'm pretty excited.
So talk a little bit about your role at CoSchedule, and let's talk a little bit about marketing processes in general.
Yeah. So I am the head of marketing demand generation at CoSchedule, and really what that means is that my team works on the marketing projects that are really at the beginning of the funnel. Like, we want to create stuff that's so good that people seek it out on their own. And I think that's kind of the goal behind a lot of content marketing out there, or it should be the goal of any marketing, is that you just create content so good that people want to find it on their own. And that's really where we step in, is building that attraction to CoSchedule content. And so we do a lot with blogging. We do like social media courses, marketing strategy courses, ebooks, and all that sort of good stuff that marketers know, like, and love. So that's kind of what I do there. CoSchedule itself.
So talk about process, right? It used to be that, how do I want to say this? Like you said, you were more on the front end, right? And I think the way I used CoSchedule first was to promote blog posts. It was very, very centered on blog articles and from blog posts out. But now you've integrated all different kinds of things. Talk about why you decided to do that.
Yeah, so I mean, CoSchedule did start as like, you have this problem of, you have a WordPress blog post and you want to promote it on social media. And so that's kind of where we stepped in from a process perspective to increase any sort of efficiency that we possibly could. But since then, it's like, we saw the need that marketers don't just create blog posts, they're creating brochureware web pages. They are creating courses, like I was just talking about, or ebooks, or webinars, or they're managing Twitter chats like this, podcasts. And we saw a need for people to come in to see one place, or come in to begin the project and kind of communicate and execute and have that one place to go to first to begin any project. And that's where CoSchedule comes into place. So yeah, we've done a lot with process research, and really trying to figure out, if you want to hit a deadline, let's say you want to publish a piece of content 2 weeks from now, how do you break down that piece of content into tasks that you can assign out and really say to yourself, if I do these things and I follow this process, that I will ship on time. So it's something that we're really passionate about. So it's pretty exciting to be here today to I'm sure we'll get into the weeds.
But we're going to get into the weeds. Absolutely. So let me ask you one of the first, people are like tumbling in. Everyone's like, oh, I got to get to the chart. So while we do that, you and I will kind of chitty chat a little bit. How often do you find that marketers and content marketers in particular are winging it?
Yeah, actually a lot. We hear from a lot of people, they use the word or the term herding cats. It feels like they're herding cats, or they might have some sort of a process right now, but it's not really efficient. And there is a huge difference there, right? Like, you want your process to remove as much of the inefficiencies as possible. Sometimes there are things that you're just doing because you've always done them. It's not necessarily the best way to do it. And so we hear, I don't know, lack of organization inspires them to look for a tool like CoSchedule too. So I would say there's a lot of winging it out there.
Yeah, when I share my processes with certain people, and this is my issue, my processes are everywhere. Right? Like you see, I've got the chat in a Google Doc. I've actually got a very rigid process that I've put like on another platform because it allows me to make a checklist and show images and videos, and because there's a whole team involved. I guess my question is there a like a right way to do the process? Is there a process to building a process?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's actually kind of a fun thing. I know that I kind of wrote about this on the CoSchedule blog at one point. Maybe I could just throw it out in the chat here in a little bit. But something that we've done is that there's this process, and it's actually talked about in a book by the former CEO at Intel, and it's called simplification. And what it does is basically you take a look at a process or a workflow as you think it should be. You lay out every single step from beginning to end. There's going to be a lot of them, and you don't limit yourself. You throw out every single thing in chronological order. And what you do afterward is really simple, but you just look for the things that you just don't need to do. So when you're thinking about that, you're looking at steps in your process that might be there out of like for office bureaucratic reasons. You know, can you remove any approvals from your workflow and just get the workflow approved before you start executing it? That's what you should look for. Or maybe there are just steps in your process today that exist because when you first started this process, you needed that reminder, but now you just kind of know and you don't need them in there. So you look for stuff like that.
Yes, it's funny because like I noticed on the process for the chat, for example, lots of things have to happen. Articles before, articles after, blah, blah, blah. And it was very, very rigid. But now that we've been through it a few times, we're good, right?
Right.
So I want to don't want to jump. What is it that, how do I ask you this question? What are some of the biggest challenges that folks have in creating a marketing process? And I mean, maybe clearly that's the problem I'm having because I want to use the tool, but haven't figured it out.
Yeah. And I think that kind of boils down to something that I think about is setting a deadline for a piece and kind of working backwards. So let's say I want to publish the recap blog post for this chat 2 days from now. Well, you have to kind of realistically think about all the steps, who is involved in those steps, and how, you know, what chronological order that they need to be done. And maybe actually the 2 day is kind of a bad example. Let's say that we're going to create a landing page for a webinar, and that webinar is in 2 weeks. Well, you have to kind of come up with what would be realistically doable within this 2 week window before that webinar should publish. And sometimes what people need to kind of think about is realistic. If you're laying out every single step, sometimes all those steps are unrealistic to do in that time frame given. So in some ways, for process, when you're setting a deadline for a piece, sometimes you need to think about like a minimum viable project too. Like maybe for your webinar, you wanted to do Facebook ads, 14 emails, like an entire social media campaign. You might just need to hone back on some of those things, right? Just to make sure that you ship on time. Instead of 14 emails, maybe you can write 2 and then recycle some stuff. So that's what we mean by the minimum viable process there. And I don't know, that I would suggest that that's a good place to think about it is cut what you can, but still ship something that's quality.
Cut what you can, but ship something that's quality. That is great advice. Now what I'm curious about is, you know, are you guys like process freaks? It sounds like from some of the wonderful downloads you have, I've seen, and I'm like, are you kidding me?
Yeah. So, I mean, what we do is we actually follow that simplification process for every piece that we take on. So, for example, when we take on a blog post, we will literally write out every single step, and then we'll kind of figure out how to condense different steps together or remove steps from our process. From there, we create a really simple checklist. There's this really great book called The Checklist Manifesto. And basically, checklists are great because they give you a visual to see how far along you are in your process. And they help you see too, if you're saying like this blog post is going to publish in 2 weeks and someone has missed their task that's due today, you can literally see well before that is publishing that you're off. Something's not right with your process. So we use checklists to help us do that. Yeah, that process of simplification, figuring out what we need to remove, assigning tasks to specific people with due dates to complete things ahead of time. We follow that verbatim. And with us too, when it comes to process, we trust the team a lot. Like there's something about a realistic workflow that means you can't always just rely on, as much as we want to say, hey, this task is assigned to you, make sure it's complete. We talk to the team beforehand and we kind of have just this informal discussion, like this is what's happening, this is who is doing what, and we have that at the beginning of the week to make sure that we're getting the work done that we set out to accomplish. And on Fridays, then we retro on that and we say, hey, we kind of set out to do this week. Did we meet that goal or not? And that helps us, trust the team to complete the work that they were hired to do. We don't want to micromanage. We don't want to have someone constantly hounding our team because they were hired to be smarter than us and tell us what to do. So we want to enable them, but we have basically our checklist as that version of truth to help us understand how far along we are in a project, so that we get stuff done on time.
Got it. So I know I'm going to hop all over the place, right? Clearly,
that's fine.
Clearly not processy, but I was just kind of curious as you were talking, and we're going to talk about teams and how they work together. In fact, let me ask you that first. How do you mentioned that you bring people together into a meeting so they know what's coming. They know what's down the pike in a process. And a lot of groups have like a production meeting of sorts, like what's happening this week, right? That we have to be aware of. So there's no surprises. Now, what are some other ways that you educate and empower your team members?
Yeah, that's awesome. And I kind of actually want to jump to the way beginning of that. So the way that we kind of plan content at CoSchedule, we talk about this a lot: plan your work, then work your plan. And we empower the team members right from the beginning, where it's like, we have these meetings where we call them like a marketing roadmap summit, where we get together and we say, what are all the ideas of things we could do? And we kind of think about a framework of 10x versus 10% when we do that. And that's from our CEO and co-founder, Garrett Moon. He's all about that, not only just for marketing, but how we run the entire company. And what we mean by that is like, what marketing project can we take on that will give us 10x growth now versus a 10% improvement? So we look for those projects that are like our headline analyzer, where it's out there, it's sticky, people come back to it, versus 10% would be like writing or making edits on a blog post when someone tells us there's missing a comma. Like that is a 10%. It's not going to change the results that content produces anyway. We'd rather focus our time creating the next headline analyzer or the next social message optimizer or something like that. So we get the whole team together to choose those projects from the beginning and kind of prioritize them so that they've had a say from the get-go in the work that we're taking on. Like this is all based on their opinions. And I'm just talking about books, but there's this book Sprint from the guys at Google Ventures. And in there, they talk about getting team buy-in from the very beginning, and that those people who help in the decision-making are much more likely to support the process once it gets to execution and to make the execution process and the outcome positive. So that's what we want to do from the beginning, is get team members involved right there. And from there, like they're involved in helping understand who needs to do what and how to execute that work. So we like to have them have a say in everything that we do.
Well, I know this isn't even part of that conversation, but one of the things, as someone who's attended your webinars whenever you have them, and I have actually used you guys as a model with clients and stuff, I'm like, God, you got to check these people's webinars out. Because it seems to those of us who are attending, whether, those of us who are users, clearly we have one relationship, and I'm sure you have prospects on that call as well, but I have the feeling the way you guys engage with your audience on your webinars actually makes us feel like part of the team.
Yeah.
And how do you do that?
That makes me really happy, because I think we've all been on those webinars where it just feels really stiff and someone's reading that introduction off to you and it's like, so-and-so is and you list all their, titles and stuff and things that they've done. And we don't do that. We hop on and we're just kind of informal. Like right now I have 0 notes prepped. This is all just a conversation. And it's fun to hear that shines through, because that's exactly what we want. We want to involve people through the chat in those webinars or in our course workshops. And we are trying to help people solve problems. And the more that we can help them feel involved and kind of connect the dots between, hey, what was your challenge? How can I talk about this in this, and tailor the webinar to be what they want to talk about, the more you'll get out of it. And so that's a lot to do with CoSchedule. Like it's fun to hear that it shines through in the webinars, but in all of our content, really informal. We write the way that we speak. We want to have jokes. Like, we don't always have to be serious. And so that's, and that spans to the entire culture here too. So it's fun to hear that shines through.
It does. It shines through. And I was, and again, I think when I've shared webinars with other people for the same reason, I'm like, clearly these guys have a process, and yet there is variation and there is flexibility. And I guess that brings to mind another question, which is, do you feel that having a process, or do your team members feel that having a process limits you or frees you up?
It frees us up. And so, with a process, I think that it sometimes feels like a dirty word, but the way that we think about it is the simplest approach is often the best place to start. And that's also something that our CEO says to Garrett Moon. Simplest approach is often the best place to start. So what we want to do is just kind of give ourselves, use our process as a checklist, as reminders of things we can do. And when we are reminded of what to do, there's less rework later on. Like, let's say we write an entire blog post, but we forget to do something that's critical to its success. Like, we can write a blog post, but we forget to write the free download that we always give away in our blog posts. All of a sudden, someone needs to come back in, and it's a fire drill at the end to try to remember where we were at with that blog post, what core takeaways we should put into a template. What kind of template should we build? We don't want to do that at the last minute. And having a process makes sure the T's are crossed, I's are dotted, that things are done when we are going to be working on that project most efficiently. So, it makes a lot more sense to finish all the tasks involved in a project at the same time, because everything's fresh in your mind. And having that process, having that checklist helps us do that work so that we can move on to the next thing. And maybe that's an interesting part too. We only take on one thing at a time. So like we have a content writer, Brianna, and she helps us write tons of blog posts. And something that we do with her is that instead of writing 4 different blog posts at a time, and she's 30% done with all of them, she will write one, get it 100% done, and move on to the next one, so that we can use her time when it's fresh in her brain. She's writing faster. She's creating the subsequent content faster, and a process helps her do that.
So process can definitely not just free you up, right? Because I've heard that having a really good tight process doesn't have you thinking about things every single time, right?
Right. And, process like that too gives her the power to say no to things. When something else pops up, it's like, no, I know that my expectations from Nathan this week are to write these 3 blog posts. And if I do this other thing, I'm not going to meet those expectations. So it really helps her to put, to focus. And if something hot comes up, to push that back to me and say, should I rethink my priorities? And we can kind of know ahead of time that, hey, we pivoted quickly. But she is empowered to keep her focus. And I think as marketers, we get sidetracked all the time. Like, all of a sudden we think we should be checking Twitter, and we think that we should be checking our email. And this sets up expectations for her that, whatever you do during the week, none of it matters besides these 3 things that I'm going to ask you about on Friday. And if they're done, great. And if not, we're going to have a conversation. And, we use a framework for that conversation too. That might be kind of fun for process people. It's, let's say you get off track on anything. What we do is we ask a few simple questions. It's, why did this happen? Try to figure out what mistakes happen.
Right.
How can we make sure that this doesn't happen again? And what should we do now to get this project back on track so that we can ship on time? So we ask those 3 questions all the time.
You just brought up something so important. Actually, I have a manufacturing background, 25 years in manufacturing. That's like too much, right? But one of the things that we learn in manufacturing, which is I love process conversations, is that processes are developed by management. Like 99% of all the people who look like they're screwing up don't want to be screwing up. Chances are the problem's in the process.
That's an awesome takeaway.
Right? And because that way, you know, if you're having a conversation with someone in your team, you know, like, well, is it going to get done? If it's not done, it's a problem. Well, chances are that person wasn't like eating bonbons. Something was going on to get them on track, because you wouldn't have hired someone who was going to eat bonbons. You hired someone who was qualified, right? All those good things. So I wanted to share an interesting tweet here. So the question was, what's the first thing you should think about before putting a process together? And Charles Franklin, who is actually on my team, and we work on process all the time, he says, understand the micro and the macro. Now, this is where it's cool. Macro is how process fits into your overall vision, but micro is how the process fits into your routine. I think that that's a really interesting little insight.
Definitely. Yeah, I like that too.
You know, and Jim says having a tight process is like muscle memory. Once you know it, you don't have to think about it. And I think we were talking about that earlier, right? Go ahead.
Oh, no. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Like something that we think about at CoSchedule, and we touch on this just a little bit, is when you first start something, it's almost like you might need some more tasks in that workflow just to remind yourself not to forget things. But after you start, it's kind of like building habits. Here's another book for you, The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. Mm-hmm. That one's really good. And if you think about this, a process from the very beginning can teach you how to build really good habits for creating any piece of content, whether it's, you know, a blog post or a brochure or whatever. But the process can help you figure out what to do, and eventually it does become muscle memory and you can work faster. There's a lot of research out there that suggests it takes 100 hours to build a habit, but you can start to see that the time invested into doing that same process will diminish over time. And that's just because it's muscle memory. Like, you don't think about when you tie your shoe, it's just
right.
habit. But when you first started, it probably took you a long time. It's the same thing with any sort of project that you take on.
That's awesome. That's so true. It just becomes a part of you. And again, and once again, if anyone is thinking the processes are going to constrain you, they can actually free you up. Okay, so now I'm going to get selfish again, even though I asked it as a question. I told you this whole entire chat is completely self-serving. You know, one key thing that a lot of marketers do, especially if you're publishing a lot online, is content. So it's like your first step into a marketing process is like having a content calendar. But having a marketing process and having a content calendar, probably not the same thing, right?
I would say not the same thing, because what I kind of think is a content calendar can inspire the process. So
question.
Yep. So like what I see as a content calendar helping out with is understanding when you want to publish things and helping you hone like the consistency skill. And if we're thinking about like content marketing, what you want to do is publish content that's so good that people seek it out. And if you publish enough of it, it'll help you build an audience over time. Not everyone's going to care about every single piece you write, but if you write 5 pieces and they care about 2 of them, that's great. So when you think about that, the consistency skill that content calendars can teach you helps you make sure that you publish lots of content. So it can help with that quantity thing. Like, and you know, everyone talks about quality over quantity, right?
Right.
But if you publish 1 piece that's amazing and that's all you do, chances of you building an audience are next to 0. So you want to be publishing more than just 1 piece. And so that's kind of where I see content calendars coming into play, is helping you understand when you want to publish things. And if you know you want to publish, like, let's say 2 blog posts a week, well, now you need to figure out how, with your resources available to you, that you can actually do that. And that's where process comes into play, because if you try to take on too much, it's going to show that it's unrealistic. And maybe you need to just publish 1 a week. But having the content calendar and saying, I'm going to publish these 2 things, helps you commit to something. And again, we talk about planning your work, then working your plan. The content calendar helps you plan your work. The process helps you work your plan. So there you go.
It's almost like I need to take that in, right? I'm going to write it down. I'm putting the content.
Perfect.
What calendar helps you plan your work. The process.
Yep, absolutely.
Helps you work your plan.
Yep. Yeah, I think that was right.
MJ. You should pop up sooner than that. on that thing. Sorry. See, this is where it gets messy. It's a good thing that the, oh, but let's not forget the hashtag. This is like a total, like Oprah, tweetable. Right?
Yeah, I'm just checking out the chat, and there's some really good stuff. Like Suzanne is saying, content calendar is only one part of the process, only deals with content. Process is more encompassing, and I agree with that. I think that the content calendar is the place to start so that you know how to do things realistically. Let's say that you have a piece of content that you want done 2 weeks from now, but you start to work through this idea of the process, and you kind of discover that it's going to take you 3 weeks to do that work with quality. Well, it's worth taking a hit right now and saying, I'm just going to start working on this project that I'm going to ship 3 weeks from now so that you can focus on quality. And from there, you kind of create what Jana Marin was on our podcast a while back. And she kind of called it a bank of content, where you build up like a 2-week period of completed things before you start shipping anything. And then all you need to do is maintain from there. And you start working on every piece 3 weeks before publish, so you never feel behind. You always have things that are done, just in case you do get sick. You have this period of grace. And I think, anyway, Suzanne kind of hit that on the head there.
You know, boy, as you were talking, that made me think of another question that is not on the chat.
That's cool.
I think it was, no, but of course it's like left me because I'm completely distracted. I wanted to ask you, why don't I just ask you the question first, and then I will think of it, and then I'll like totally be off topic. When you're developing this marketing process, how do you do that? Is there someone that's in charge? Remember I said the whole process thing is like management owns the process. So who's in charge of putting together a marketing process?
Yeah, I really let the team own it. I mean, we kind of talked about how we choose the projects at the very beginning, but once it breaks down, and let's say we're starting with that number one project, something that I'll do from a project perspective is a marketing campaign rarely ever exists as one piece of content. And so I am involved as like maybe a lead on a project management lead there as what content should we create as part of this campaign. From there, though, I kind of just think about who on our team might be best suited to complete each piece. So for example, when you have a webinar, you need a landing page, you have a deck for it, you have a blog post recap video, and you have a social media promotion and probably some emails and maybe even some ads. So that's a campaign, and I have lots of different pieces of content that I can create as part of that campaign. I'm responsible for helping choose those pieces that would be a part of that and basically coming up with the MVP. Like maybe for this webinar, Facebook ads is just too much. We could cut that out for the sake of shipping faster. But once we have those content pieces and understand who might be the best lead to complete each part, I let them own that process for completing that work. So our designer, whatever she wants to do to design the deck, that's perfect. Whoever is writing emails, however they want to write emails and make the schedule, they own that piece. And that helps them have autonomy, helps them not feel like it's being micromanaged. And that goes into the trust too. Like if you have questions, ask, but you own this piece. And if you need to collaborate with people, collaborate with other team members. Don't come to me, like collaborate with the right people because we know that they're going to be involved in this. So I think that team ownership helps.
Yeah, absolutely. And we did a lot of that in manufacturing as well. You know, okay, so I remembered the two things I wanted to ask you because you saw
Nice.
me feverishly. That's what that was. One, okay, a stupid, simple question. Your content is awesome. I mean, how long does it take you guys on average to create? And let me go from start to finish, not just the article, because it, like you said, every article has like a checklist or a download or like something, right? And it's promoted. And so how long does it take it from idea to where it's running through the social promotion?
Yeah, we try to do that in a 3-week burst, if that makes sense. And I can kind of like even simplify that down because this is another element of process. Like we rely on our checklists sometimes as just like making sure that we're getting the right things done. And this is the way that it kind of works with that 3 weeks. Is the very first week we write the piece. So even before that, we have our ideas mapped out for about, I think it's for about 3 months. We have normal blog post ideas on the calendar so that once someone who is writing a post, they never have to go in with the blinking cursor and make a fast decision poorly. We map that out ahead of schedule. So we choose a lot of our topics based on keywords because it shows that there's audience intent there. It shows that there's going to be evergreen potential for people to find that content well after it publishes. So we start, well before 3 weeks, I guess. But in week 1, we write the piece, we do the content upgrades, we write the headlines, and everything is written. Any written content is done that week. The second week, it goes into design. So we design the blog posts, and if the content upgrade or template needs to be designed, that's when that happens. And in the third week, we just polish everything up. We make sure that it's optimized for search engines. We make sure that our, all of the formatting looks really nice, and we schedule it to publish. So that's like the 3 week in a nutshell how we do that. So to write a piece, actually, it takes us about a day and a half to 2 days. Design probably takes half a day. And then to button everything up, it's maybe an hour per piece. So it's really fast. But another element of process, too, is that we are working on multiple pieces. And so we'll have Brianna write and get everything done for that post in a sprint is what we call it.
Right.
And then move on to the next thing. But we can have multiple people working on different things at the same time. And so we definitely leverage that.
And so does that mean that for you guys, when they get to their, they get into their CoSchedule platform, they know they're writing one piece at a time, right? So Brianna's only doing one piece at a time. And how do people, what does that look like in real life? Is everyone doing one article at a time?
Pretty much. Anytime, when we take on a piece or when we take on a project, what we want to do is make sure that we set aside the right amount of time to complete that work efficiently. So even before we look at our CoSchedule calendar, something that we do is, and we borrow this from Agile product management methodology, but we plan things in sprints. And you're coming from, a manufacturing background, so maybe some of this would apply there too. But we literally have a map of the things that we're going to do mapped out for the next probably 3 to 6 months at a very high level. And what we'll do is we'll kind of break that down week over week and understand when we're going to ship certain things. And that really helps at the larger campaign level before we map out the actual dates on the CoSchedule calendar. So I don't know if that's kind of meandering just a little bit, but at a high level, we know the work that someone is going to do that week. And we just use a simple Evernote note to kind of communicate that, where it's like, hey, write this blog post. And we don't have everything on that list, every single task involved in that post, because that's managed through CoSchedule. So we have this high level overview for the next 6 months. And then we have an Evernote note where it's just the high level overview of this week. And then CoSchedule breaks down every single task so that we can communicate it, or execute really efficiently. So I don't know if that,
I think it does.
That helps.
A question, especially regarding team members. Is everyone an in-house team member, or do you have virtual folks as well?
Everyone, we are 100% a North Dakota-based company. So we have 2 offices in North Dakota. Yeah, one in Bismarck, our capital, and one in Fargo, North Dakota, where I'm calling in from right now. So we don't have any remote people really, but we have, we communicate all the time through CoSchedule. Actually, there's discussions. So what's nice there is let's say we're writing a blog post, we can communicate all through there on that piece so that we don't have endless emails. Like we were talking before we got on, in CoSchedule, we don't use email for any internal communication at all. And CoSchedule really helps us keep the communication where we're creating content. And that's really helpful there. But yeah, and then we use video conferencing software.
Got it. That's fascinating, right? Because I guess I always think about, you just kind of sort of have these 2 offices, but I always think about how these tools have to help people integrating processes. I always liken it to some very, very confusing basketball game where you're like, or a hot potato, where something is constantly getting thrown and received, right? So it doesn't always look pretty, but there's something there. Now, I know I wanted to talk about this sales. What role does sales have in the overall process?
Yeah, and I kind of was thinking about that question because I think it's really great. And especially when it comes to process, something that I think about there is that every piece of content exists for a larger purpose. Like if you're creating content just to create content, you're doing it wrong. Content should never be the result. What you're after is actual results. So as part of your process, or something that we do, especially for larger scale campaigns, is we come up with what we call talking points to begin with, where we try to figure out the emotional reason why someone would care. And as part of that, we kind of come up with what we call a launch brief for the project. And right there, as far as sales goes, is what is the call to action? Who is that target audience? Why do they care? And what is your call to action to get them to basically, marketing exists to drive profitable customer action. So how are you going to make them do that? And if it's a long tail play, like getting them to sign up for your email list, well, I do understand that, but how do you get them deeper into that funnel? So understand what your call to action is on a piece from the very beginning so you can plan everything around it.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so that brings to mind the very original question. I sort of alluded to it, and I think I've asked it before, but I got to ask it again. You know, a lot of platforms either focus on social or, you know, that they have other purposes, right? But one of the things that was really, really astounding to me, and probably had me not using CoSchedule as much as I probably could, is that the article is the foundation. The content is the foundation. I mean, CoSchedule is about everything. Like it's, for example, until recently, like you kind of wouldn't use CoSchedule for social media engagement per se, right? You would use it to promote a piece of content, right?
Yeah.
And get engagement around that piece of content. Why? What is your guys' philosophy about why content is the core?
Yeah, I think that's an awesome question because honestly, CoSchedule is and how it has always been about content plus social media. That's like how we got our name to CoSchedule, like schedule both together. And the way that we think about that is like you're putting a lot of hard work into the content. And the way that I think about this is that no matter what you're doing, if you are building a following, like if you're 100% after social media engagement, that's great. There should be avenues and ways for you to do social media engagement tactics. Like this Twitter chat is an example of that, right? But at some point, you know, if marketing is about profitable customer action, you need to get them to a place where they are likely to convert into paying customers. And the best way to do that is to somehow figure out how to get traffic back to your website. Like something that I talk about, and some marketers don't like this take, but you can't convert someone who doesn't exist. If you get zero traffic to your website, you cannot convert anyone into paying customers. Now, I see social media as the best way to build a relationship with someone when you're digital. And when you know, like, and trust someone, people buy from people they know, like, and trust. So there's definitely a play for social media engagement tactics. But where CoSchedule comes in is for social media marketing. And when you think about it that way, for promoting your blog posts, there's no other tool that does it better. Like if you're creating a landing page for a webinar, you can manage an entire campaign to promote something like that from CoSchedule. And that's kind of where I see it is when you're thinking about return. That's where CoSchedule can really help. So let's say you've built up this huge social media audience. It doesn't do anything unless you figure out a way to convert their actions into profit. And it's an interesting take on that, but you have to get traffic in order to do that.
Yeah. And well, you know what? It's one of the things I really like. I think everyone needs to have a point of view, and you know what customers you're getting and what customers you're not getting.
Right.
You know, that's
right.
all there is to it.
Yeah, and like we're friends with social media engagement tools or companies like Post Planner, like Rebecca Radice over there. She's great, and that is a social media engagement tool.
Correct.
That's perfect. Like that would work very well with CoSchedule if you wanted to try using both. Like otherwise, like you can schedule things that are engagement related out of CoSchedule too. Like if you want to share videos, you can plan everything in advance and schedule those things to share out of CoSchedule. Videos are great for that, right? Or you could with this Twitter chat use a social template and basically create the formula for this chat with all your questions and answers and schedule everything in advance and talk like we're talking right now. Like, in fact, all my answers are going out of CoSchedule right now because I knew we were going to be chatting.
Right.
So it can work that way too.
That's very interesting. I'll have to explore that because I do it another way. So, but hey, we're talking about automation. So let's talk about what you can automate with your marketing process and what are some different ways that you can automate.
Yeah. So the way I think about automation, and I think almost like process, some of this is like some people might see that as a dirty word. And I don't think so, because what you have to remember about automation or scheduling in general is that a person has to create that content. Someone is writing the blog post that you're sharing, or maybe it's even just a social media message. You have to write that social media message. You have to design that graphic or curate the infographic or the image, right? Someone is responsible for the human experience there. What automation does is it just allows you to spend that time up front doing that work and then dripping something out over time, because otherwise you're going to be in front of Twitter all day long, and that becomes, automate whatever is tedious, manual, busy work, right? It doesn't eliminate the humanity behind it, especially if you're thinking about social media. Like you can schedule things out and then use a tool like Mention to monitor that and respond afterward, right?
Right.
So schedule what you can so that you can focus your efforts on more 10x things. Like what is your next project that's going to grow your business 10 times over? It's probably not manually looking at Twitter once an hour, trying to memorize those best times and tweeting manually. It's just, that's the most inefficient thing I've ever heard. Schedule that stuff out. Like spend an hour a week doing that and forget about it.
Exactly. And there's, and then people get very upset about automation sometimes, but I think it really is, what is your intention behind the automation? There are some things you can automate, some things you can't, and you shouldn't, right? So, so I have to say it for all the folks that are out there, because they're like, I hate automated DMs. I hate automated DMs. And so much so I don't even use DMs. So like, if you want to DM me, say, hey, I just messaged you. Otherwise, I'm not going to look at it, right? So let's see where we're at here. Are you getting tired?
Oh, I'm good. I'm just like, I'm looking at the chat right now. So let's see. Small Biz Opinion says that you should automate email marketing, social media posting, and look at Google alerts to stay on top of industry news. That's great.
Yeah. So, so let's talk about it. So we talked about Post Planner, which I really love, because I generally have, I cannot be like funny, humorous, or engaging on demand. So Post Planner is a great tool for automating those things. I've actually even automated reminders for this chat using Post Planner and some really fun images and stuff like that. CoSchedule, of course, we've been talking about this whole time. What are some other tools for, managing that marketing process?
Yeah. I think that's a good question. And, if we're thinking about process in general, I guess some of the things that we use from a process standpoint is we begin very broadly with just like that prioritized list of what we should be doing. And we use a spreadsheet just to track down all of our ideas and just keep it going. And we use Google Sheets so that everyone can be in there at the same time and entering ideas. Something that Excel doesn't have going for it is that someone has it locked and then it's just chaos. But we don't really need to communicate around that because it's just like a brain dump of things. When we're planning at a really high level of breaking down a project, we'll kind of start with that Google Sheet and we'll move into CoSchedule to plan deadlines for each piece within a campaign, and then CoSchedule to manage the task workflow process. And then from there, like we will use the specific platforms that we're going to be publishing to manage a lot of that. Like I'll write posts right in WordPress just because I think that's efficient. Otherwise, we use stuff like Google Docs to write content.
Oh my God, I love that. Oh my God. This was like, I decided to mess around with that. I wrote my post because, one of the issues with Google, the great thing is everyone gets to contribute and you get to put your notes and blah, blah, blah. Then you put your images in there so that you know where the images are supposed to go. And now you can't get it into WordPress. Like best
right.
ever, you guys.
Yeah. So with CoSchedule, if you write your blog posts in Google Docs and you include images, there's that handy convert to WordPress feature. And I think we're one of the only tools, I don't even know of another tool that does that. Your text, all your images and everything, just boom, transfer over into WordPress, and all of your images transfer natively into the media library. Yep. And it works really well. So we love using Google Docs for writing our content because especially we have a couple new hires that are helping us write posts. It helps Ben, our blog manager, communicate really efficiently. Like he can just put a comment on like, hey, this paragraph isn't as actionable as it should be, which is something that we want, or a standard of performance in CoSchedule content is how can I turn this good advice into actual practice?
Yes.
So,
and that's what makes your content so yummy.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I'm going to spread the word to the team. They do, I can't take any of the credit for that. That's all them.
Well, you can see when people, and you can tell, and I think a lot of times you can tell when people are working hard. Oh, and let's talk about that for a second, right? Where you are, you have writers, you're giving feedback, and you actually have something in your process about what that content is supposed to be like.
Absolutely.
Talk a little bit about that. How do you integrate process and feedback with your team?
Yes. So we have what we call a standard of performance. And I kind of borrowed that term from another book. What is it? The Score Will Take Care of Itself by Bill Walsh. He was the head coach of the 49ers when they won all the Super Bowls back in the day. And what he did, or the standard of performance, is just basically setting expectations of what will be produced or what the end result will look like before someone ever does work. So what that looks like, at least for our blog at CoSchedule, it's we have the definition of what done is before someone starts. And we have 5 key traits of our content, and those are a really great topic, something our audience will care about. That when we choose that, it's keyword driven because that shows that audience intent, people will be looking for it. And something that we don't want to do is spend a lot of time creating these posts that are only popular while we're sending emails and social promotion for it. We want it to be popular long term. So keyword driven, that it's well researched, that the claims we make are backed by fact. So if you ever see a post at CoSchedule that's like 30 social media engagement tactics that will drive traffic, every single one of those better be backed by an example or a stat that says these are generating traffic. We have to have the post be comprehensive and actionable is one too. So there are way too many marketing blogs out there that provide really great advice, like do Facebook ads. Great.
Right.
How do I actually do them? If we covered that topic, it'd be way too broad for us. We'd probably want to target a specific niche portion of it, like how to do Facebook target audience optimization, or how to write creative Facebook ad copy. We'd have to target something micro because part of we want to be comprehensive with that topic.
Or Facebook shares that get engagement, like, using your tool, right? Like, how do you write? Because you have to write your face, each of those has to be unique.
Absolutely. And so that's a great example. And the last thing is that every blog post is optimized to convert someone into an email subscriber. And the reason for that is that more people see our blog than anything else, not our homepage, not our website content. So we treat every blog post as if it is the homepage of CoSchedule. So when someone new comes, we want to make sure that we get their permission to talk to them again. And we believe that content is the foundation that we can build a relationship with someone. And if we share content that's really good and people start trusting us for our advice, they'll start to trust us as they hone their process and as they become a better marketer and as they get more advanced, that they will need a place to get organized and have a process. And they will start to trust that CoSchedule itself as a tool will be just as good as the content that we are publishing.
Yeah, I totally get that. Now, is that something that like lives somewhere, or is that on a checklist or what?
Yep, that's part of our, whenever we have someone new who joins, we have what we call an onboarding checklist where we'll have them read. What's cool about us is like we don't have a documented marketing strategy, and we probably never will. But we do, because we're a meta marketing company, we write about the stuff that we do all the time. So we'll just have newbies read our blog posts. But we believe that the simplest approach is the best place to start. So we have that stuff kind of written down in 4 bullet points in an Evernote note, and that's it.
Got it. Yeah, so you just always, my mom is a writer, and one of the things she always said was, write your thesis at the top, and then every 2 sentences look back and say, am I still talking about what I'm supposed to be talking about?
Yeah. And then speaking of that, like our outlining process is really robust because of that too. Like we think about, how we were talking about how does it connect into sales? When we start a piece, any piece, we ask that question, what's in it for me? Figure out that call to action and outline everything, and basically come back to it. Does this go back to the angle or the claim that we were making? And does it connect into the call to action that we want to do? And we'll kind of like, as part of our process, review that outline really well before we start writing, because that prevents us from thrashing at the end. And I think everyone's kind of been there where they get done with a piece and then all of a sudden someone tells them, oh, that's no good. We try to avoid that from the very beginning. And so anyway, that's a great advice for a process, is come up with that thesis first.
Yeah, I love everything you said. I'm like, everyone's going to have to like watch this like 2, 3 times over, because you have shared some really, really incredible advice, practical, easy to use, and all that kind of good stuff. And keep it away. Okay, so the question I have, let's talk about obstacles and challenges. What are some things that you guys have had challenges with as you've been structuring, this process, not just for the platform, but for yourself?
Yeah. Oh, our challenges at CoSchedule?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we can talk about other challenges too, right? But I'm kind of curious as to, I think we're all human beings. People come together into right? You just all come together and.
Right. And I think, challenges in general is the number one thing is to be realistic with yourself and know how much work your team can realistically take on. And so use your process as a guide, a framework, and know that it's constantly living. Like your process shouldn't be so rigid that it really puts people in their place, but you should be having a conversation about it throughout everything. And the way that we do this at CoSchedule is that we will start doing something, we'll come up with what we think would be a good process. And after we've done something, we'll retro on it. So we'll just ask ourselves, what went well, what went wrong, what can we do better next time? We will change up what we're doing so that we don't make the same mistakes. Something that we say is make mistakes once. And then what we'll do is we'll start that process again. And we kind of mentioned this earlier, but it's kind of like building habits, right? You're not going to, or any skill, you can't pick up a guitar on day one and expect to play a solo like Kirk Hammett from Metallica. It's just not going to happen. You can't do the same for any piece of content that you're taking on either. Your first time, it's going to be rough, but you need to ship it. You need to get it out there. You need to analyze the results. You need to look at how you did things, what you do differently next time, and do it again, and do it again and again and again. And there's a lot of data out there that says that is the only way to learn how to build a skill. You can't do something once and say that you have that skill. Repetition at its core is what helps you become an efficient, content marketer or social media marketer or any job that you want to do. So that's the way I think about it, I guess.
I think that's awesome. Okay, so last question, Nathan. I hope it's not too hard for you. What do you know for sure when it comes to marketing processes?
Yeah, I think the core takeaway that I'd say is don't let a lack of a process prevent you from getting started, or fear of like this has to be perfect. I think as marketers, we're type A and we shoot for perfection a lot of times, but that if you don't ship something, you actually haven't done anything at all. And I think that might be a direct quote from Linchpin by Seth Godin. So another book for you. But shooting for perfection itself is imperfect, and making sure that you're getting out there, that you are publishing something, all of it is a learning opportunity. And you need to kind of think about it from that perspective, is come up with that MVP or the minimum viable process, execute it and learn. And that's what I know for sure about anything. Like I've used the same exact approach for starting a podcast at CoSchedule, for writing blog posts, for doing webinars, for hosting our own Twitter chat a while back, doing courses. These are all things I had never done before, but you just need to start, hone, and then master. And that's the best advice I could say.
Awesome. So have you been in content marketing all your professional life? How did you end up at CoSchedule?
Yeah, this is actually a really fun story for me. So I was at a larger corporate company that sold electrical utility supplies to large utility companies. And when I was there, I was kind of brought on to be a jack of all trades, like a lot of marketers are. And I really saw the value in content marketing as a way for us to teach electrical like linemen and utility contractors how to do certain things. And I kind of fought tooth and nail to start a small team doing that there. And at the same time, it was really hard to change corporate culture, which I'm sure a lot of people deal with. And so I started writing a blog, just a personal blog about how I'd manage a marketing team. And our CEO and co-founder, Garrett, found it. And basically, I was doing this on Saturdays as a hobby. And he basically gave me the option to turn my hobby into my day job. And that's how I got started at CoSchedule as the first non-developer hire. And it's been a blast ever since. So I've been with CoSchedule since November 2014.
Okay, because I was going to say, I feel like you've been there for a while. I was on and off. When did CoSchedule sort of hit the ground running?
Yeah, we started in September 2013. So okay. We're still a relatively young company, but we've grown drastically. We've got like users in 100 plus countries around the world, thousands and thousands of users. So that it's been a blast. Being a part and helping this thing grow. It's been
How did you guys get those? So by the time you got there, they'd already had probably quite a few customers. I'd been on again, off again. Now I'm on again. So now my question to you is, how did CoSchedule get all their customers? What do you think was the secret to your success?
Yeah. I think that's an interesting question because it definitely ties into marketing a lot. And like, I don't mean to toot my own horn, but you can make the best product in the world, but if you tell no one about it, no one will know. Mm-hmm. And I think the very best advice I'd have for people who want to grow their business would be to figure out how to build an audience around something that they would care about. And the way that we think about that at CoSchedule is a content core. So there are things that you want to talk about to sell your business. And then there are the things that the audience wants, or the things that they care about. And you need to find that intersect. And if you can find that, they will have a reason to find your content interesting. So for example, like what we'll do is we'll publish a blog post on the best times to promote or post on social media. Something we know it's a question our audience asks us all the time. But just so happens that we have a best time scheduling feature in CoSchedule, so you don't need to worry about it. So we find that intersect. So that's a good example. Like you can remember all these best times to post yourself and manually do it, or you can just let CoSchedule do it automatically for you and not worry about it. So that's a great, example. And that post itself, like it's, 200,000 something page views a month. So we know that the intent is there. So we're finding our right audience fit. So as we got started, we really looked at the questions that our audience was asking and trying to answer them through content. And a lot of times we really focus on keywords first because it showed that the intent was there to find the content that we wanted to publish, to find a solution like CoSchedule is. So build your audience first.
I am surprised there is one book you did not mention today. Content Inc.
Content Inc.
It sounds like you guys are like singing off the same song sheet right there.
Yeah, I actually haven't read that one from Joe yet. I mean, I've read his other books, so.
Content, it's literally, when I asked you, you know, how you did it, and you're like, through everything that you're saying, right? Choose a platform, you know, choose a message, choose the content, so on and so forth. You know, taking the time to write your content. You're going to read this and go, yeah.
Preaching to the choir. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's interesting because, like, too, something that I see as a challenge there is that when you're new, like this happened at CoSchedule too, is like you need to focus on publishing really great stuff for a long time. And the results are going to be minimal when you get started because no one trusts you yet. Mm-hmm. But that's at that point, I kind of see that as a content foundation is what I've kind of called it, where it's like you need to build this library so that when someone sees something brand new that you're sharing, like they're just on your email list and they see something new, that when they come back to your website, at least we know at CoSchedule that people see 3 to 4 pages every visit, that they have those 3 to 4 other blog posts that are just as good to come back to. So focus on that. Your page views and all of that will be minimal at first. Like make no mistake, but that is your opportunity to build the skill too. So focus on that content foundation, and the results will probably start pouring in slightly after 6 to 12 months. So give yourself time and just know that it's a long tail play. Content marketing is not something that happens quickly.
Well, Nathan, I cannot thank you enough for being here. I almost feel like, you know, I've got, what is that called? An online Twitter crush or something. When someone from a platform that you use and love, it's always so great. Thank you for sharing all your wonderful tips. You guys are going to want to watch this replay at least 2 or 3 times. Take advantage of those tips. Nathan Ellering from CoSchedule, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us on. It was a lot of fun today, so I really appreciate this.
Awesome.